The knock at dawn. The February wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded animal, rattling the windows of Thomas Hendricks' farmhouse. At 63, Thomas had weathered countless blizzards, but this one was different. The thermometer outside his kitchen window read -25 degrees, and the snow had been falling for 3 days straight. He was pouring his second cup of coffee when he heard it, a weak, desperate knocking at his front door. Thomas paused, certain the wind was playing tricks on his aging ears. But there was again, more urgent this time. Setting down his mug, he shuffled to the door, his arthritic knees protesting with each step. When he pulled it open, a figure collapsed across his threshold. It was a young man, no older than 30, wearing what appeared to be a torn flight suit. His lips were blue, his face covered in frost, and his eyes, those desperate, pleading eyes, locked onto Thomas's. "Please," the man whispered through chattering teeth. "Please, help me." Thomas didn't hesitate. Years of isolation had made him cautious, but his humanity hadn't frozen over yet. He dragged the man inside, shocked by how light he felt, how the ice crystals in his hair sparkled in the lamplight like broken glass. "What in God's name happened to you?" Thomas muttered, kicking the door shut against the storm. But the young man had already lost consciousness. Working with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades dealing with emergencies on a remote farm, Thomas stripped off the frozen flight suit, revealing severe frostbite on the man's fingers and toes. He wrapped him in every blanket he owned and positioned him near the wood stove, not too close. He knew better than that. Hypothermia victims needed to warm gradually. As Thomas worked, he noticed details. The flight suit bore military insignia, but they'd been torn off. There was a nasty gash on the man's temple, partially frozen. In the pocket of the suit, Thomas found a dog tag. Captain James Morrison, United States Air Force. But there was something else. A crumpled photograph of a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. On the back, someone had written Emma, Christmas 2019. Thomas made hot broth and waited. The storm outside intensified, cutting off any possibility of calling for medical help. The phone lines had been down since yesterday, and his cell phone had no signal this far out. It was just him and this frozen stranger, trapped together in a farmhouse that suddenly felt too small. Hours passed. Thomas dozed in his armchair, jerking awake periodically to check on his unexpected guest. Each time, he found himself studying the man's face. There was something haunting about those features, the strong jawline, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands clenched even in unconsciousness, as if fighting some invisible enemy. It was nearly midnight when Captain Morrison's eyes finally fluttered open. He looked around wildly, disoriented, his breathing rapid and shallow. "Easy, son," Thomas said gently, moving to his side. "You're safe. You're in my farmhouse, about 40 miles north of Great Falls." "How long?" Morrison's voice was rough, damaged from the cold. "About 16 hours since you showed up at my door, looking like a ghost." Morrison tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "My plane. I need to. They're looking for me." "Nothing's looking for anybody in this weather," Thomas assured him. "Storm's got everything shut down. You're stuck here until it passes." A look of pure anguish crossed Morrison's face. "You don't understand. I can't be here. I have to." He broke into a fit of violent coughing. Thomas pressed a cup of broth into his hands. "What you have to do is recover. Whatever you're running from, it can wait until you can stand on your own 2 feet. But as Morrison's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear and something Thomas couldn't quite name, the old farmer realized this was no ordinary rescue. This frozen pilot carried secrets that the Montana winter had temporarily buried, secrets that were about to thaw in ways neither man could predict. Stories in the snow. 3 days passed before the storm finally exhausted itself. During that time, Thomas and James Morrison existed in a strange bubble of isolation, 2 men from different worlds forced into proximity by nature's fury. James recovered slowly. The frostbite hadn't been as severe as Thomas initially feared, though his fingers remained bandaged and his movements were stiff and painful. Thomas tended to him with the same quiet competence he applied to everything, No fuss, no questions, just steady care. But on the third night, as they sat by the fire listening to the wind's dying gasps, James finally began to talk. "I was flying reconnaissance," he said quietly, staring into the flames. "Routine mission over the Rockies. Then something went wrong with the aircraft. Electrical failure, maybe sabotage, I don't know. I ejected at 15,000 feet. Thomas nodded, not pushing, just listening. I should have landed near the emergency coordinates, but the wind carried me. I walked for hours before I saw your light." James paused, his jaw tightening. But that's not the whole truth. The admission hung in the air between them. Thomas poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle he kept for special occasions or terrible ones. He wasn't sure which this qualified as. "I was carrying classified information," James continued. "Documents about a program that, let's just say, some powerful people want it buried. When my plane went down, I made a choice. I hid the flight recorder and the documents before I started walking. I couldn't risk them being recovered with me. And now," Thomas asked, "now I'm officially missing, presumed dead. And that's probably for the best." James's hand instinctively went to his chest, where a scar peeked out from beneath his borrowed shirt. "There are people who would be very happy if I stayed that way." Thomas absorbed this information with the calm of a man who'd learned not to be surprised by life's complications. "The little girl in the photo, Emma, is she yours?" Pain flashed across James's face, raw and immediate. "My daughter. She's 7 now. Lives with her mother in Seattle. We divorced 2 years ago." His voice cracked slightly. "Sarah, my ex-wife, she said I love the Air Force more than I love them. Maybe she was right. And is that why you're running? For the Air Force?" "I'm running because I discovered something that makes me a liability. I'm running because if I go back, I'll either be silenced or forced to stay silent." James looked at Thomas directly. "But mostly, I'm running because I realize that if I die in some convenient accident, Emma will remember me as the father who chose duty over her. I want the chance to change that." Thomas studied the younger man. In his weathered features, James must have seen something trustworthy, because he continued, "That's why I can't let them find me yet. I need time to figure out how to expose what I know without getting killed. I need time to become someone Emma can be proud of." The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Thomas took a long sip of his whiskey before speaking. 20 years ago, he said slowly, "I had a son, David. He was about your age when he died. Tractor accident, right here on this farm." The words came out measured, as if he was reading from a script he'd memorized but rarely performed. "His last words to me were an apology. Said he was sorry for not being good enough, for disappointing me." Thomas's hands tightened around his glass. "I spent the next 2 decades wondering what I'd done to make him feel that way. What kind of father makes his son feel like a disappointment?" James was quiet, understanding that this wasn't a conversation. It was a confession. "Point is," Thomas continued, "you've got something I'll never have again. You've got time. You've got the chance to go back to that little girl and show her who you really are. Don't waste it by dying in my guest room or spending the rest of your life hiding in shadows." You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying, but it's necessary. Thomas met his eyes. "You want to expose these people? You want to protect your daughter? Then you need to be smart about it. And you need help. You're a farmer in the middle of nowhere. No offense, but what kind of help can you offer?" For the first time since James had collapsed on his doorstep, Thomas smiled. It was a small, knowing smile that suggested hidden depths. "Before I was a farmer, I was other things. And I've got resources you'd be surprised by. More importantly, I've got something you don't. Nothing to lose." He raised his glass. "So here's my offer. You stay here, heal up properly, and let me help you figure this out. In return, when this is over, you promise me you'll go back to Emma and be the father she deserves." James stared at him for a long moment, then slowly raised his own glass. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Thomas replied. "I know you walked through a blizzard with frostbite rather than give up. I know you carry your daughter's picture next to your heart. And I know you knocked on a stranger's door and said, 'Please.' That tells me everything I need to know." Their glasses clinked softly in the quiet farmhouse, sealing a pact between 2 broken men seeking redemption, uncovering the truth. The storm's aftermath left the world transformed. Pristine white blankets covering everything, power lines down, roads impassable. Thomas's farmhouse remained an island of isolation, which suited their purposes perfectly. As James's physical strength returned, their real work began. Thomas's farmhouse, it turned out, was far more than it appeared. In a basement James hadn't known existed, Thomas revealed a setup that belonged more in a spy thriller than a Montana farm. Military intelligence, Thomas explained, gesturing to the computers and communication equipment lining the walls. 30 years in the service before I bought this place. Officially retired, but I still have access to certain databases. Old habits die hard. James was stunned. You said you were a farmer. I'm a farmer. I'm also a former colonel in Army intelligence. People are complicated, Captain Morrison. We contain multitudes. Over the next week, they pieced together James's situation. Using Thomas's connections and careful, untraceable searches, they discovered that James's accident had indeed been reported, but the official story was different from what James remembered. According to military records, his plane had experienced mechanical failure, and despite a thorough search, no trace of pilot or aircraft had been found. He was listed as missing, presumed dead. But deeper digging revealed inconsistencies. The maintenance records for James's aircraft had been altered. The flight plan had been changed after takeoff. And most damning, 3 other pilots who'd been part of the same reconnaissance program were also dead, all within the past 6 months, all in seemingly unrelated accidents. This is bigger than I thought, James said, staring at the screen displaying the faces of his dead colleagues. They're systematically eliminating everyone who knew about Project Lighthouse. Project Lighthouse. Even the name sent chills down James's spine. What he discovered during those reconnaissance missions wasn't supposed to exist. Experimental weapons testing in areas that were supposed to be off-limits, contamination of water supplies, civilian exposure to hazardous materials. All of it hidden, all of it denied, all of it protected by people with enough power to erase anyone who threatened exposure. We need the evidence you hid, Thomas said. Without it, you're just another conspiracy theorist. With it, you're a whistleblower with proof. It's buried in the snow, coordinates I have memorized. About 15 miles from here, near where I ejected. Can you find it again? In my sleep. Thomas studied the topographical maps spread across his desk. The snow's too deep for my truck. We'll need snowmobiles. And we'll need to move fast. Once the road's clear, search parties will expand their radius. If they haven't already. They spent 2 days preparing. Thomas, despite his age, moved with surprising vigor, checking equipment with military precision. He taught James how to navigate by stars and landmarks, how to move without leaving obvious trails, how to survive if things went wrong. During their preparations, James learned more about his mysterious benefactor. Thomas had been part of covert operations during the Cold War, running intelligence networks in Eastern Europe. He'd seen the dark side of power, the way secrets could corrupt, the cost of blind obedience. When his son David died, Thomas had walked away from everything, seeking peace in isolation. But peace isn't the same as purpose, Thomas admitted one evening. I've been existing, not living. Maybe you stumbling into my life was fate's way of telling me I'm not done yet. On the 7th day since James's arrival, they set out at dawn. The world was diamond bright, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Thomas drove the lead snowmobile with confidence, James following behind, each movement still causing small jolts of pain through his healing body. They traveled in silence, the Engine's roar preventing conversation. James navigated by memory and instinct, recognizing rock formations and tree patterns even under their snowy disguise. 3 hours in, he signaled Thomas to stop. Here, he said, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. The evidence is buried right here. They dug for 30 minutes before James's shovel hit something solid. Together, they unearthed a waterproof case, military grade, exactly where James had buried it before beginning his desperate walk towards civilization. Inside, the aircraft's black box, encrypted drives, and physical documents, photographs, test results, classified memos. Everything needed to prove Project Lighthouse's existence and the crimes committed in its name. Thomas examined the contents with a professional eye. This is damning, but it also makes you the most dangerous man in America right now. The moment we surface this, everything changes. I know, James said quietly, but I'm tired of running. And more importantly, I'm tired of being complicit. These people poisoned civilians, Thomas. Children are getting sick because of what they did. If I stay silent, I'm just as guilty. Thomas nodded slowly. Then we do this right. We make copies, establish dead man's switches, contact journalists and lawyers simultaneously. We build a web so complex that silencing you becomes impossible. He paused. But you need to understand, your life as Captain James Morrison is over. Even if we succeed, you'll never be the same man who climbed into that cockpit. James looked at the case in his hands, then pulled out his phone, one Thomas had secured, untraceable and encrypted. He opened the photo gallery to a picture of Emma, taken at Christmas, her smile bright with joy and innocence. Maybe that's okay, he said softly. Maybe Captain Morrison needed to die so James could figure out how to be a real father. They secured the evidence and began the journey back. Neither noticed the small drone hovering at a distance or the way its camera tracked their every movement. The hunt was about to begin. Shadows closing in. They had 48 hours before everything went to hell. Thomas spent the first day creating digital redundancies. He uploaded encrypted files to secure servers across 3 continents, established automated release protocols, and contacted 5 different investigative journalists through channels that couldn't be traced back to the farmhouse. James, meanwhile, worked on his testimony, writing everything he'd witnessed, every detail of Project Lighthouse, every name of every official involved. His hand cramped from writing, but he pushed through. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about reclaiming his integrity. On the second day, they prepared to move. Thomas had safe houses established years ago for exactly this kind of situation. The plan was to get James somewhere secure before going public, somewhere he could coordinate with lawyers and journalists without being vulnerable. They were packing the truck when Thomas's security system pinged. Someone was approaching the farm. "Company," Thomas said quietly, checking his monitors. 3 vehicles, black SUVs with government plates, coming up the access road. They found us faster than I expected. James's blood ran cold. Ow! Does it matter? Thomas moved with military efficiency, grabbing weapons from a hidden cabinet. "We got maybe 5 minutes before they arrive. You need to go. Now. I'm not leaving you. You have to. This evidence means nothing if you're dead or disappeared into some black site." Thomas thrust a backpack into James's hands. "Everything you need is in here. Cash, new identity documents, contacts. There's a snowmobile in the back barn. Head northeast to coordinates I've written down. There's a cabin, fully stocked. Wait there for 48 hours. If I don't contact you, proceed with the release protocols." "Thomas, that's an order, Captain." Thomas's voice carried the weight of his former rank. "Your mission is to survive and expose these bastards. Mine is to buy you time. Don't waste what I'm giving you." James wanted to argue, but the sound of engines was growing louder. Through the window, he could see the SUVs cresting the hill. There wasn't time. "Thank you," James said, the words inadequate for everything Thomas had done. For everything. Thomas smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Thank me by being there for Emma." "And James? Tell the truth. No matter what they threaten, no matter what they promise, tell the truth. It's the only weapon they can't take from you." James ran. He made it to the back barn as the first SUV pulled into the front drive. The snowmobile started on the first try. Thomas maintained his equipment impeccably. James took one last look at the farmhouse, seeing Thomas standing on the porch, calm and dignified as armed men emerged from the vehicles. Then James opened the throttle and disappeared into the white wilderness. He drove for 3 hours, following Thomas's directions, constantly checking behind him for pursuit. The cabin appeared exactly where Thomas had indicated, a small structure built into a hillside, camouflaged and remote. Inside, he found supplies for weeks, communication equipment, and a laptop with detailed instructions. Thomas had thought of everything. James tried calling the farmhouse on the encrypted line Thomas had given him. No answer. He tried again every hour for the next 24 hours. Still nothing. The silence was deafening, carrying implications James didn't want to consider. On the second day, a message arrived through one of Thomas's secure channels. James's hands shook as he opened it. It wasn't from Thomas. It was from someone named Margaret Shun, identifying herself as one of Thomas's old colleagues from Army intelligence. The message was brief and devastating. Thomas Hendricks was taken into federal custody 36 hours ago. Charges unknown, location classified. I'm pulling strings, but he's deep in the system. He asked me to tell you, proceed with plan. Don't stop. The truth matters more than any individual. He also said to tell Emma her father is a hero. Move forward. MC. James sat back, grief and fury warring inside him. Thomas had sacrificed himself, knowing exactly what would happen, choosing to give James the time needed to complete their mission. The old farmer had done this for a stranger, for redemption, for the son he'd lost, and the hope that maybe, somehow, helping James would balance the cosmic scales. James pulled out his laptop and began drafting messages to journalists. He uploaded documents to the automated release system. He recorded video testimony, speaking directly to camera, explaining everything about Project Lighthouse and the conspiracy to hide it. And finally, he called Sarah's number, his ex-wife's phone, hoping she would answer. She did. Hello. Sarah, it's James. Silence. Then, James? Oh my God. They said you were dead. They came to the house, told Emma. I know. I'm sorry. I can't explain everything now, but I need you to listen carefully. In the next 24 hours, a lot of information is going to become public. Information about me, about what I've been doing. It's going to be all over the news. What have you done? Why should I have done a long time ago? I'm telling the truth, Sarah, no matter what it costs me. He paused, gathering courage. But I need you to tell Emma something for me. Tell her that her father loves her. Tell her that everything I'm doing now, I'm doing because I want her to grow up in a world where people don't get away with hurting others. Tell her I'm trying to be the man she deserves. Sarah was crying now. Are you in danger? Probably. But I'm also doing the right thing, finally. And Sarah? If something happens to me, if I don't make it through this, there's a trust fund. Thomas Hendricks set it up. Information is in the document release. It'll be enough to take care of Emma, send her to college, everything she needs. James, I have to go, but I need you to know you were right. I did choose wrong before. I chose duty over family, secrets over truth. I'm trying to fix that now. Tell Emma I love her. Tell her every day. He ended the call before Sarah could respond, before his resolve could weaken. Then James Morrison pressed enter and released everything. The truth flooded into the world like a dam breaking. Documents, testimony, evidence. Within hours, news organizations were running stories. Within 12 hours, congressional leaders were calling for investigations. Within 24 hours, the name Project Lighthouse was trending worldwide. James waited in the cabin, watching the storm he'd unleashed, wondering if it would be enough. Wondering if Thomas was alive to see it. Wondering if Emma would understand someday why her father had become a ghost before becoming a hero. Outside, the Montana winter continued its ancient work, covering tracks and burying secrets. But some truths, once exposed, can never be hidden again. The price of truth. The world exploded with revelations. Within 3 days of James's data release, Project Lighthouse dominated every news cycle. Senators demanded hearings. The Secretary of Defense resigned. Activists rallied. The evidence was irrefutable, and the public outcry was deafening. But James experienced none of it firsthand. He remained in Thomas's cabin, monitoring events through encrypted connections, a ghost watching the living world react to his testimony. Margaret Shun became his lifeline. The former intelligence officer, now working as a private security consultant, coordinated his movements and kept him updated on Thomas's situation. The news wasn't good. They're holding him at a military detention facility, Margaret explained during one of their secure video calls. The charges keep changing: aiding a fugitive, obstruction of justice, possession of classified materials. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Can we get him out? I'm working on it. But, James, you need to understand, Thomas knew this would happen. He has contingency plans, documents that release if he's harmed, connections in Congress, lawyers ready to pounce. He's playing chess while they're playing checkers. That doesn't make me feel better about him sitting in a cell. It shouldn't. But it should make you focus on finishing what you both started. Margaret's face was stern on the screen. The momentum is with you right now. Don't waste it. She was right. James began coordinating with journalists directly, providing additional context connecting dots. He gave remote interviews to major news networks, his face obscured, his voice modulated, but his story unwavering. The pushback came hard and fast. Government officials labeled him a traitor. Military leadership questioned his mental stability. Smear campaigns painted him as disgruntled, unstable, a fabricator. They attacked his character, his service record, even his divorce from Sarah. But the evidence spoke louder than their denials. Independent analysts verified the document's authenticity. Whistleblowers from within Project Lighthouse began coming forward, emboldened by James's testimony. The wall of silence was cracking. 3 weeks after going public, James received an unexpected message from Sarah. Emma wants to talk to you. His heart nearly stopped. Margaret had established a secure line that couldn't be traced, and Sarah had grudgingly agreed to use it for a brief call. James's hands trembled as he dialed. Daddy. Emma's voice was small, uncertain. Hi, baby girl. James's voice cracked. Hi. I'm so sorry I've been gone. Mom said you're doing something important. Something brave. I'm trying to do the right thing. Are you safe? The question devastated him. 7 years old, and she was worrying about his safety. I'm okay. I'm staying somewhere quiet. But Emma, I need you to know something. Everything I'm doing, every choice I'm making now, it's because I love you. I want you to grow up in a better world. Do you understand? I think so. A pause. Daddy, are you a hero or a bad guy? Some kids at school say you're a bad guy because you're on the news. James closed his eyes. I made mistakes, sweetheart. Big ones. But I'm trying to fix them now. Sometimes being a hero means doing things that are hard, things that make people angry. It means telling the truth, even when it's scary. Like when I told Mrs. Peterson that Tommy cheated on the test, even though Tommy got mad at me. A surprised laugh escaped him. Exactly like that. You were brave, Emma. Braver than I was for a long time. I want you to come home. I want that too. More than anything. And I will, I promise. As soon as I can make sure everything is safe and right. But until then, I need you to be strong for me. Can you do that? I can be strong. Her voice was small but determined. That's my girl. I love you so much, Emma. Never forget that. I love you too, Daddy. After the call ended, James sat in silence for a long time. Margaret had warned him that emotional connections could weaken resolve, could make him vulnerable. But talking to Emma had done the opposite. It had reminded him why he was doing this. Not for abstract justice, but for her, for the world she would inherit. The breakthrough came a month after the initial release. A congressional subcommittee, facing overwhelming public pressure, announced formal hearings. They invited James to testify in person, guaranteed his safety, and promised immunity from prosecution for any classified information he revealed. It could be a trap, Margaret warned. They could grab you the moment you surface. Or it could be legitimate. The public pressure is enormous. They need to be seen doing something. James looked at her through the screen. And Margaret, I can't hide forever. This only works if I put a face to the testimony. If I show people I'm real, not some faceless whistleblower. What about Thomas? If I testify publicly, with the world watching, they can't keep him locked up. The optics would be disastrous. He becomes leverage I can use. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You've learned a lot from that old farmer. He taught me that hiding isn't the same as surviving. And surviving isn't the same as living. 2 weeks later, James Morrison walked into a congressional hearing room. He'd been smuggled to Washington, D.C. through a network of support Margaret had established. Safe houses, trusted allies, routes designed to avoid detection until the last possible moment. The hearing room was packed. Cameras everywhere. senators behind their raised bench. And in the gallery, James saw Sarah and Emma. His ex-wife had brought their daughter, against all advice because Emma had insisted. "I need to see Daddy being brave," Emma had reportedly told her mother. James took his seat, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then he began speaking. He talked about Project Lighthouse, about the contamination, about his colleagues who died for knowing too much. He provided evidence, answered questions, and never wavered. The testimony lasted 6 hours. By the end, 3 senators were calling for criminal investigations, 2 had tears in their eyes, and the internet had exploded with support for the frozen pilot. As James was led out of the hearing room under heavy security, Emma broke free from Sarah and ran to him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her up, holding her tight while cameras flashed and the world watched a father and daughter reunite. "You were so brave, Daddy," Emma whispered against his neck. "I learned it from you," he whispered back. That night, under pressure that had become insurmountable, the military announced they were releasing Thomas Hendricks from detention, citing procedural irregularities in his arrest. 2 days later, in a small cafe in Washington, D.C., James and Thomas sat across from each other for the first time since that desperate morning at the farmhouse. Thomas looked thinner, older, but his eyes were sharp and alive. "You did good, son." "We did good," James corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Thomas smiled. "Maybe, but you had the courage to knock on my door in the first place. That took something I couldn't teach you. That was all yours." They talked for hours about everything and nothing. About what came next, about Emma, about the farm Thomas would return to, about redemption and second chances. As they prepared to part ways, James pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. Trust documents. Emma's education is covered, but there's more. For repairs to your farm, for whatever you need. Consider it payment for saving my life." Thomas tried to refuse, but James insisted. "You gave me back my daughter, Thomas. You gave me back myself. Let me give you something in return." Finally, Thomas accepted. As they shook hands, the old farmer said quietly, "My son David, I never got to make things right with him. But helping you, seeing you reunite with Emma, maybe that's as close to redemption as I'm going to get." "Maybe redemption isn't about fixing the past," James said. "Maybe it's about changing the future." They parted as friends, 2 men whose lives had intersected at the exact moment each needed saving. New horizons. 6 months after the hearing, James stood in the backyard of Sarah's house, what had once been their house in what felt like another lifetime, watching Emma play with newfound confidence. She'd become something of a celebrity at school, her father's story transforming him from absent parent to principled hero in the eyes of her classmates. Sarah joined him on the porch, handing him a beer. Their relationship had evolved into something neither expected. Not romantic, but respectful, collaborative. Partners in parenting, if nothing else. "She wants to move in with you," Sarah said quietly. "For the school year. Not permanently, but she's asking." James nearly dropped his beer. "What?" "She says she wants to understand you better. Want to spend real time with you, not just supervised visits." Sarah looked at him. "I told her we'd discuss it, that it was a big decision. What do you think?" "I think 6 months ago, I'd have said no immediately. But you've been here every weekend. You video call her 3 times a week. You've actually shown up, James. For the first time since the divorce, you've really shown up." She paused. "So I think we should consider it." Before James could respond, Emma ran up, breathless and grinning. "Dad, did Mom tell you? About me maybe living with you?" "She did." "How do you feel about it?" I want to know you better." And she hesitated, suddenly shy. "I want to be like you, brave and truthful." James knelt down to her level. "Emma, I'm not perfect. I made big mistakes. I'm still making mistakes. But you fixed them. You told the truth, even when it was scary." She looked at him with those serious eyes that reminded him so much of his own. "Mr. Hendricks says that's what heroes do. You've been talking to Thomas?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "He calls sometimes. He told me about his farm and about how you showed up frozen at his door, like a popsicle person." She giggled at the image. "He said you were the bravest frozen person he ever met." James felt his throat tighten. Thomas had reached out to Emma directly, building a connection between them. The old farmer was creating the support network James needed to be the father Emma deserved. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, James drove out to a small apartment he'd been renting. Nothing fancy, but it was his, clean and honest and free of secrets. He'd left the military with an honorable discharge after the hearings, unable to return to service even if he'd wanted to. Too famous, too controversial, too much a symbol of dissent. But he'd found work as a consultant for aviation safety, leveraging his experience for something positive. The pay was good, the work meaningful, and he could do it while being present for Emma. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. His phone rang. "Margaret Chun, thought you'd want to know," she said without preamble. "The Justice Department filed charges today. 7 officials, including a general and 2 defense contractors. Project Lighthouse is officially being dismantled. How many people were affected by the contamination? Over 3,000, according to the latest reports. Class action lawsuits are proceeding. Your testimony is the cornerstone of the case." She paused. "You did it, James. You actually did it. We did it. You, me, Thomas, all of us. Speaking of Thomas, he asked me to tell you he's planning a visit next month. Wants to meet Emma properly." James smiled. "He's always welcome." After hanging up, James opened his laptop and began typing an email. It had taken him weeks to find the right words, to figure out how to express what he needed to say. "Dear Emma," he typed, "by the time you read this, you'll be older. Maybe 16, maybe 21. Old enough to understand things in ways you can't yet. I'm writing this to explain why I made the choices I did, why I disappeared into that Montana winter, and why I came back. I learned something from a farmer named Thomas Hendricks. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to do what's right despite the fear. For too long, I chose wrong. I chose career over family, secrets over truth, comfort over integrity. But when my plane went down and I walked through that frozen wilderness, something changed. Maybe it was facing death. Maybe it was the desperate hope of seeing you again. Or maybe it was meeting a man who showed me what real redemption looks like. I want you to know that every hard choice I've made since then, I've made thinking about you. What kind of world I want you to grow up in. What kind of father I want to be. What values I want to pass on. You don't have to be perfect, Emma. You just have to be honest. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be brave. And you never, ever have to face your struggles alone. Ask for help. Accept kindness from strangers. Be someone else's frozen pilot who knocks on their door. I love you more than you'll ever know. I'm proud of you every single day. And I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that you're more important to me than any secret, any mission, any duty. Love always, Dad." He saved the document, backed it up, and filed it away, a letter for the future whenever Emma might need it. 3 years later, Emma Morrison stood in front of her 8th grade class for career day. Other kids had brought parents who were doctors, lawyers, engineers. Emma had brought Thomas Hendricks. "This is Mr. Hendricks," she told her classmates. "He's a farmer from Montana, but he's also a hero. He saved my dad's life." Thomas, now 66 and even more weathered, shifted uncomfortably at the attention. "I'm no hero, kids. I just did what anyone should do, help someone who needed it." "But you didn't have to," Emma pressed. "You could have closed your door. You could have called the authorities. Instead, you risked everything to help a stranger." One student raised her hand. "Why did you do it?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Because a long time ago, I failed someone I loved. And when your dad showed up at my door, frozen and desperate, it felt like I was being given a second chance. Not to fix the past, but to do better in the present." He looked at Emma, and his eyes were bright. "Your father taught me something important. It's never too late to become who you're supposed to be. Never too late to do the right thing." I was a lonely old man hiding from life. He reminded me that I still had something to offer the world. After the presentation, Emma hugged Thomas tightly. "Thank you for saving my dad. Thank you for sharing him with an old farmer," Thomas replied. "He's a good man, your father. Better than he knows." That evening, the 3 of them had dinner at James's house. Now, a real home, filled with Emma's artwork and report cards and the comfortable mess of actual family life. Thomas had become a regular fixture in their lives, visiting every few months, video calling weekly, a grandfather figure filling a space none of them had known was empty. As Thomas prepared to leave for his return trip to Montana, James walked him to his truck. "I never properly thank you," James said, "for everything. You thank me every time I see you and Emma together. Every time I hear about another official going to trial because of your testimony. Every time I wake up and remember that I'm not just existing anymore. I'm living." Thomas gripped James's shoulder. "We saved each other, son. That's how it works. Will you come back for Emma's graduation? High school's still a few years away, but wouldn't miss it for the world." They shook hands, then embraced. Two men who'd found redemption in the most unlikely of circumstances, a frozen pilot and a lonely farmer whose lives had intersected at exactly the right moment. As Thomas drove away, Emma joined her father on the porch. "Dad," she asked, "when I grow up, I want to be like you and Mr. Hendricks." "What do you mean?" "I want to be someone who tells the truth, who helps people even when it's hard, who knocks on doors." She looked up at him. "Is that a good thing to want?" James pulled her close. "That's the best thing to want." Above them, stars began emerging in the darkening sky, the same stars that had guided James through that desperate Montana winter 3 years ago. The same stars that shone over Thomas's farm, over the places where secrets had been buried and truths unearthed. And in that moment, standing with his daughter, James Morrison felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of purpose. Not the end of his story, but the beginning of the one that mattered most. The one where he'd been brave enough to knock on a stranger's door, and wise enough to walk through the door that opened in return. The one where two broken men had found redemption in helping each other become whole. The one where truth mattered more than comfort, where courage meant facing consequences, where family became the mission that superseded all others. It wasn't the life Captain James Morrison had planned. It was infinitely better. It was real. 10 years after that frozen February morning, Thomas Hendricks passed away peacefully on his Montana farm. He was 73 years old, surrounded by friends, with James and Emma at his bedside. In his will, he left the farm to James with one condition: that it be used to help others in need of second chances. James honored that wish, transforming it into a retreat for whistleblowers, a safe haven for those brave enough to tell difficult truths, a place where frozen pilots of all kinds could find warmth. Emma Morrison, at 17, gave the eulogy at Thomas's funeral. She spoke of courage, redemption, and the extraordinary things that happen when people choose compassion over indifference. "Mr. Hendricks used to say that we're all capable of heroism," she told the gathered crowd. "Not the dramatic kind in movies, but the quiet kind that happens when we open our doors to strangers, when we risk comfort for truth, when we believe people can change." He saved my father's life, and in doing so, he saved mine too, because I got to grow up knowing that integrity matters, that truth is worth fighting for, and that the best thing we can do is help each other become who we're meant to be. I'm studying law now, preparing to be an attorney. I want to represent people like my dad, people who risk everything to do what's right. And I learned that from a farmer who understood that planting seeds isn't just about crops. It's about hope, growth, and the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. Years later, when historians documented the Project Lighthouse scandal and its aftermath, they would note the remarkable chain of events: a pilot who refused to stay silent, a farmer who refused to close his door, a daughter who learned what courage really meant. But the story's real power wasn't in headlines or hearings. It was in the small moments: a man carrying another through a blizzard, a child learning what integrity means, an old farmer finding purpose in his final years. It was in the reminder that one act of kindness, one moment of courage, one decision to help instead of turn away, that these things ripple outward in ways we can never fully predict or measure. It was in the truth that we're all frozen pilots sometimes, desperately seeking warmth. And we're all farmers too, capable of opening our doors, offering shelter, changing lives. The story of James Morrison and Thomas Hendricks became legend in certain circles. Proof that it's never too late for redemption, that help comes from unexpected places, and that the most profound transformations begin with 3 simple words: Please, help me. And with 3 even simpler words in response. Come in. Welcome.